my mom?" The innocent voice of a 6-year-old little girl echoed through a luxurious ballroom, filled with some of the city's most powerful and dangerous people. The entire room fell silent. No one could believe a child had just asked the notorious Mafia boss that question in front of hundreds of distinguished guests. Every eye turned toward the man standing frozen in the middle of the hall. Everyone expected him to laugh it off, or politely avoid answering. Instead, after a long moment of silence, the feared Mafia boss slowly knelt before the little girl and gave an answer that left everyone in the room utterly speechless. None of them knew that this unforgettable moment was only the beginning of a story about loss, courage, and a love powerful enough to change all of their lives forever. Before we begin this heartwarming story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you enjoy emotional stories like this, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to support us. Now, let's begin. The Saturday market on Prince Street smelled like roasted chestnuts, and the kind of wind that only came at the end of autumn, sharp along the edges of the cobblestones, warm where the sun caught the awnings. Vendors had set their folding tables under strings of paper lanterns, and the Manhattan air moved slow between the stalls. The way a city sometimes forgets it is a city. Alessandro Moretti did not move slow. He moved through the crowd alone, without a driver behind him, without a single man at his shoulder, which anyone who knew him would have said was not a thing he did. A gust came off the corner. A mason jar tipped on the edge of a quilting table. Buttons scattered across the stones, rolling in every direction, one of them coming to rest against the polished leather of his shoe. He stopped. He knelt. He picked them up one at a time, brass and bone and pearl, into his open palm. "Thank you, mister." A small girl was crouched beside him, 6 years old, missing a front tooth, holding out both hands like a bowl. She did not know who he was. She would not have cared if she did. "This one is my favorite," she said, lifting a tiny blue button shaped like a star, from the shirt I wore on my birthday. Quick footsteps behind them. A woman's voice, breathless. "Emma." Sophia Bennett came around the corner of the neighboring stall, sawdust still clinging to the canvas apron tied at her waist, a streak of it across the back of her hand where she had wiped without thinking. She saw the stranger kneeling beside her daughter, and her whole body went still, the particular stillness of a mother deciding, in 1 second, whether to run or reach. Alessandro rose. He held out the last of the buttons on his open palm. Their eyes met. Not recognition. Something quieter than that. The particular silence that falls over two strangers when neither one is in a hurry to look away first. He looked at her longer than he had meant to. The Moretti estate on the north shore of Long Island sat behind a wall of old stone and older trees, the kind of property that did not announce itself because it did not have to. Marble in the entry hall, a chandelier that had been shipped in pieces from Palermo before the Second War. And, running through all of it, a silence that was not empty so much as disciplined, the way a room can hold its breath for a very long time when the man who lives there prefers it that way. Alessandro's study sat at the back of the house, above the garden, 3 doors down from a wing no one had opened in a long while. He hung his coat, closed the door, and stood for a moment in the middle of the room without turning on the second lamp. On the desk, in a plain silver frame, sat a photograph of a woman he no longer got to speak to, Isabella, 3 years gone this coming winter, taken by a bullet that had been meant for him. On the marble steps of a hotel in Rome she had not wanted to leave. He kept the photograph where he would see it every morning, not out of longing, out of discipline. A reminder of the one thing his money and his name had not been able to protect. By the door, mounted at shoulder height, a brass coat hook sat empty. It had held her coat once, a long camel one she wore in the winters. He had never taken the hook down. An empty hook was an honest thing. It did not pretend the coat was coming back, and it did not pretend it had never hung there. It held the shape of an absence, the way some rooms did. A single knock. Marco Bianchi stepped in, folder under one arm, the settled quiet of a man who had walked beside Alessandro, since both of them were younger than they cared to remember. He set the folder on the desk and did not sit. "Brooklyn's clean," he said. "The waterfront moved on schedule. 2 of the Queen's boys made noise near the docks last night. Nothing that needed answering." Alessandro nodded once. Marco waited. Then, because he had earned the right to say it out loud, "You came in late. I walked back from Prince Street. You walked. I walked." Marco did not push. He had learned, over the years, that his boss gave up information the way a locked drawer gave up its contents, slowly, and only when the tumblers happened to line up. Something had come home with him tonight. Marco did not know what. He was in no hurry to guess. Alessandro turned the pen on the blotter a quarter of a turn. "The dining chairs," he said. The set from Nonno Vittorio. The ones in the East storage. What about them? Find me someone in the borough who works on old wood, not the usual shops. Someone with hands. A pause. Someone who takes their time. Marco studied him for the length of a slow breath, then wrote it in the folder without a word. For 3 years, Alessandro had disappeared into the work. Numbers, territories, phone calls at 4 a.m. It had been easier than staying in any one room long enough to notice the coat hook. Something about a jar of buttons on the stones had not yet let him look away. Bennett Restoration sat halfway down a quiet block in Carroll Gardens, wedged between a shoe repair that had been there since the 60s and a coffee shop with only 4 seats inside. The sign above the door was hand-painted, the paint at the corners just beginning to lift. A bell on a leather strap hung from the inside handle. It made the kind of sound that told a shop it had a visitor before anyone had to look up. Alessandro parked the SUV himself. He got out without waiting for Marco, and he did not take the man at the wheel of the second car with him either. Both men noticed. Neither said a word. Marco stayed behind the glass, hands folded, watching the street the way he had been taught to watch streets before he had a name for what he was doing. The bell rang. Sophia straightened at her workbench, chisel still in one hand. She saw him, and her face did the small, careful thing it did with strangers, polite on the surface, wary underneath. Then she placed him, the market, the buttons, the look that had gone on a beat too long. Mr. Moretti, Miss Bennett. He gave her the name the way she had given him his, plainly, without adjustment. From behind the workbench, a small head popped up like a spring. Mama, it's the button man. Emma abandoned her coloring book, ran the length of the shop in her mended sneakers, and stopped just short of him, suddenly shy for exactly 1 second before deciding she wasn't. You came back. I came for chairs. We have chairs, Emma said seriously, as though this had not occurred to anyone yet. Behind him, the back doors of the SUV opened. 2 men in dark coats began carrying pieces down onto the sidewalk, 6 chairs in all, each wrapped in furniture, blankets, and taped at the joints, the way a museum crates alone. They set them just inside the door and left without a sound. Sophia moved to the nearest one and lifted the corner of the blanket. Her hand went to the top rail before her eyes did. She ran her thumb along the grain, felt where a joint had gone soft, where the wood had held. She read it the way a slower reader reads a first page, not skimming. Alessandro watched her hands. Mahogany, Cuban. If the color is honest, she said. Original joinery. Nobody's put a screw in this in 100 years. 1911. My great-grandfather commissioned the set in Palermo. My grandfather brought them over on a ship in 1952. Nonno Vittorio, Emma said, pleased with herself for having listened. Sophia's mouth almost smiled. She caught it, filed it away. 6 chairs, she said. Framework, seat rebuilds, refinish only where the finish is gone. I can have the first 2 done in about 3 weeks, the rest by the end of the 2nd month. She named a figure. It was fair. It was the same figure she would have named to a man in a paint-stained jacket. He nodded once. He did not haggle. He would have paid 4 times that, and both of them knew it, and neither of them said so. Emma was already at his elbow, holding out her mason jar. You have to see the buttons in the light. She lifted one and then another, gravely, one at a time. This one's from my birthday dress when I turned 5. This one's from Mama's favorite sweater, from before. This one is the blue one you already know. He crouched down to her height without meaning to. He looked at each button as she named it, the way a man looks at something small that has been made important by being kept. When he finally stood, Sophia was watching him from across the workbench with an expression he could not quite read. 3 weeks for the first pair, she said again, quieter now. I'll come back before then. He said it before he had decided to. He heard himself say it. He did not take it back. Out on the sidewalk, Marco started the engine without asking where they were going. Alessandro slid into the passenger seat, looked once at the hand-painted sign above the door, and understood, with the small discomfort of a man watching a decision get made without his signature, that he was going to come back to this block many more times than the chairs required. He came back 3 times in the following 2 weeks. Each time, he had a reason ready before he opened the door of the SUV. The first time, he said he wanted to see the wood after the old finish had come off, in case anything underneath changed the plan. The second time, he brought a photograph of a sideboard the same craftsman had built in the old country, in case it helped her match the tone. The third time, he did not bother with a reason. He simply arrived on a slow evening, 20 minutes before dark, and Sophia looked up from her workbench and did not ask him why he was there. Marco began to notice. He did not ask either. He noticed the way his boss checked his watch differently on the drive over than on the drive back. He noticed that Alessandro, who had always kept his coat on in shops, took it off inside this one now. He noticed that the second car had stopped following them to Carroll Gardens at all. Marco filed these things where he filed everything, quietly, and drove. Inside the shop, the light in the back changed as the afternoons got shorter. Sophia worked later. The bench lamp threw a warm circle over her hands, and the rest of the room went soft around it. Her face in that light looked tired in the honest way tired faces do when the tiredness is earned. Cheekbones sharper than the rest of her, a small line between her eyebrows that came out only when she was working on something that mattered. She had the first chair frame apart on the bench. She was reseating the mortise joints with hide glue and hand-cut wedges, the way it had been done 100 years ago. No screws, no modern shortcuts. She had taken out one loose peg and turned a new one from the same species of wood she found in the off-cut drawer, and she was fitting it now, tapping it, testing it, tapping it again. "Measure twice, cut once, don't rush," she said, half to herself. Alessandro heard her say it 3 different times on 3 different visits. He came to understand it was not something she said to him. It was something she said to keep her hands honest. He told her, that second afternoon, about his grandfather, about the ship that crossed in the early 50s, about the chairs coming over crated in straw, and how the old man had said a chair a husband built for his wife's table should outlast the house it stood in. He told her these things, and waited for the next question. The one people always asked. The one that started with, "What does your family do now?" She did not ask it. She asked him, instead, whether his grandfather had made the pegs or bought them. She asked whether the original glue had been hide or hoof. She asked, once, whether the old man had let anyone else sit in these chairs at a Sunday table, or whether they had been kept for company. He answered each question as though he had never been asked anything like it before, because in a certain way, he had not. Around 4, the bell would ring. Emma would come in from school with her backpack tugging one shoulder down, and she would kiss her mother on the cheek without breaking stride, and she would settle at the small back table with her coloring book and a jelly jar of pencils. She would look up sometimes and say, "Hi, Mr. Alessandro," and go back to her drawing. It took him 3 visits to understand what was strange about the room. It was the first place in a long time where nobody had approached him as the man he was outside of it. Nobody stood when he came in. Nobody lowered their voice. Sophia treated him like a man who had brought her wood. Emma treated him like a man who had once bent down for buttons. He was not the boss here. He was only a man on a stool by a workbench, watching a woman fit a peg into a hole that had waited a century to be closed. He came by again on a Thursday. Later than he had meant to. The block had already emptied. The coffee shop next door had flipped its sign. Only the light in Bennett Restoration was still on, and Emma was on the front step in her jacket, a piece of cardboard flattened across her knees, drawing something in blue pencil that ran off the edge of the board and continued in the air. "Mr. Alessandro, Emma, I'm making a house." She turned the cardboard so he could see. There was a roof, and a chimney, and a very tall window with a mason jar drawn inside it. "This is where the Buttons live." He almost smiled. He was about to step past her when he noticed her sneakers. He hadn't looked at them straight on before. The left toe had split along the seam, and someone had closed it back up with careful, uneven stitches in a thread that did not match the shoe. The stitches were tight. Whoever had done them had known what they were doing. They had also known they were not going to do it again anytime soon. Emma noticed him noticing. "Mama fixed them. I can see that. She says shoes are easy, roofs are harder." She said it the way a child says a line she has heard so many times it has become a fact of weather. She was already back to her drawing before she finished the sentence. Something moved in his chest, low and quiet. He knew the shape of that sentence. He had grown up hearing a version of it, in another language, in a smaller kitchen, with a man who had come home smelling of stone dust, and told his wife, when the rain came through the ceiling, that the shoes were the easy part. That man had eventually put a new roof on the house. It had taken him 7 years. Alessandro filed the sneakers away. The first clue. He stepped inside. Sophia was at the workbench, but she wasn't working. She was bent over a small notebook, a stub of pencil in her hand, and she was doing numbers, the same numbers twice, the way people do when they are hoping the second time will come out different. He caught only a glimpse before she saw him, and closed the notebook against her chest, all in one motion, the way someone folds a private letter. The smile came back on. The familiar one, the one she used on customers. "You're here late. I was in the neighborhood. That excuse is getting thinner every time you use it." "I know." She turned to the chair, the way she did when she needed her hands to have somewhere to be. He did not ask what the numbers were. He did not need to. He had lived long enough to know what a woman's face did when a column of figures was not adding up the way she needed it to. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and took out an envelope. "For materials," he said. "The fabric you mentioned, and the finish. And whatever else the second half of the work needs." Sophia looked at the envelope. She did not take it right away. "That's too much. It's what materials cost when the piece is worth doing right. That's not true, and we both know it. Then take it for the ones after these. There will be others." She held his eyes for a second longer than a shopkeeper holds a customer's. Then she took the envelope. She did not open it. She set it on the workbench beside the notebook and put her hand flat over both, briefly, like a woman weighing something. "Thank you, Mr. Moretti." She said it the way a person says thank you when saying it costs them something. Not humble, not warm, something older than either of those, and closer to the bone. He nodded once and let himself out. On the step, Emma was gone. Only the piece of cardboard remained, propped against the wall, the drawing of a house with a jar of buttons in the highest window, waiting for someone to come put a roof on it. The rain started around 3 and did not stop. By the time Alessandro turned onto the block, the gutters were running full and the awnings were beaded with water. The coffee shop next door was closed for the afternoon. A hand-lettered sign in the window of the shoe repair said back Monday. Only Bennett Restoration still had a light on. He told Marco to wait in the car. He came up under the awning and slowed at the door. He had meant to knock. He had his hand almost to the wood when he heard her voice through it, low, kept in. The way people speak when they know the walls are thin and the child next door might come home any minute. "I understand that. I do." A pause. "No, I heard you the first time. I'm not arguing. I just need until the 15th. Another pause. "Longer, please." The word came out flat, not begging, but stripped of every extra thing. It was the voice of a person who had learned that begging did not work, and had said the word anyway because it was the only word left. He heard her draw in a breath. He heard the receiver being set down against the workbench, not into its cradle. He heard her, for a long moment, not move. He counted to 10. Then he pushed the door. The bell rang. She was already turned toward it by the time he came in, wiping the heel of her hand across one cheek so quickly he almost missed it. The smile came up on her face the way a lamp comes on. Bright, not warm. "You're going to catch cold coming out in this." "Where's Emma?" "With Mrs. Halloran. Upstairs. She keeps her when it rains this hard." "Emma likes her cat." He nodded. He did not look at the phone lying on its side. "I finished the first one," she said. "Do you want to see?" She led him to the back. There, on a pair of low sawhorses, sat the first of the dining chairs, rebuilt. The frame had been re-glued and re-waxed. The seat had been rebuilt from the webbing up. The whole thing was upholstered in a deep amber velvet that caught what little light came through the front window and held it. Warm, quiet, almost lit from inside. He put his hand on the top rail without meaning to. "Sophia." She looked up at the sound of her own name in his mouth. "This is beautiful," she flushed. He watched the color come up along her jaw and then along her ears, and she looked away from him at the chair, and she said, quietly, "Thank you." The pride in her was so careful it hurt to look at. He stayed. He asked, in a roundabout way, whether her list of customers had grown at all this season. She said things were steady. He asked whether the rain was affecting the foot traffic. She said the rain affected everyone. He asked, gently, whether the shop was hers or she rented the space. She said, rented, and immediately turned the conversation to the second chair and what she was thinking of doing with the piping. He let her. He stayed almost 2 hours. He didn't sit down. He stood by the workbench, hands in the pockets of his coat, and asked her things about wood. Outside, when he finally came down the step, Marco was in the front seat of the SUV with the wipers on intermittent, watching the rain run off the awning. His face did not change when the door opened. His eyes did. Marco had timed him. 2 hours was a long time. Where to? Home. Marco pulled out. 3 blocks later, Alessandro spoke, without turning his head. "I want to know who owns her building, who holds her lease, whether she's current on it, whether there's paper on her anywhere in the borough." "Understood." Quietly, Marco. "Always. She doesn't hear my name in any of it. Not from you. Not from anyone you use." Marco nodded once. At the road. The wipers came across the glass. The rain kept coming down. Alessandro watched the water break apart on the windshield, and did not, for the rest of the ride, say another word. He came in the morning this time. He drove the second chair himself, in the back of the SUV, wrapped in the same blanket she had used on the first. Marco carried it inside for him and set it down beside the workbench and stepped back out to the sidewalk without a word. The shop was empty. Emma was at school. Sophia was in the back, running water in the small sink, her voice calling out that she would be right there. He set his coat on the stool. The counter by the register was where she kept her mail. It always sat there in the same neat, stacked way, held together by a rubber band gone soft from being reused too many times. He had noticed it before and had not looked. This morning, the top envelope was different, larger, printed with a return address he knew by name, the way a man in his line of work came to know the names of every property holding on the island whether he wanted to or not. Manhattan Property Holdings. Underneath the letterhead, in bold type he did not have to lean in to read, the words "Notice to vacate." He looked away almost as fast as he had looked, but it was too late. He had already read the date at the top of the letter. He had already read the line that said final. He had already read enough. Water shut off in the back. Sophia came around the corner, drying her hands on a rag, and saw his face before he could arrange it. Her eyes went from him to the counter and back, and everything in her stopped. "Did you read my mail?" Her voice was very quiet, very sharp. It was sitting on the counter. "That's not the same as not reading it." "No." He held her look. "It isn't." He did not apologize. Apologizing would have meant pretending he could unknow it now. She set the rag down on the workbench in a way that was not quite gentle. "I don't need you to fix this. I know. I've been fixing things my whole life, Mr. Moretti. I fixed my mother's kitchen when I was 12. I fixed my own car for 8 years. I fixed a life for my daughter after her father died in a way I do not have the strength to explain to you today. I do not need a man in a coat to walk in here and see one letter and decide he is going to write a check and make it go away." Her voice broke on the last word and she caught it, and she stood there very straight with her hands flat on the workbench, waiting for him to be like every other person she had had to say no to. He did not offer her money. He had learned that lesson in another life, from a woman he no longer got to talk to. Pity killed love faster than distance did. A man who wrote a check to make a woman's problem disappear was a man who had already decided he could not stay in the room while she solved it. "I'm not offering to fix anything," he said. "I'm telling you I saw it. What you do with that is yours." She looked at him for a long time. Some of the fight went out of her shoulders. It did not go anywhere better. It went to a quieter place, the kind of exhaustion that had been waiting behind the anger the whole time. "End of the month," she said. Her voice had gone flat. "After that, I don't know where we go." He nodded once. He did not say anything he could not follow through on. He put his coat back on. He picked up his hat from the stool. At the door he stopped with his hand on the frame and did not turn around. "Thank you for showing me the chair. Get out, Mr. Moretti." She said it without heat. She said it like a woman closing a door on herself, not on him. He stepped out onto the sidewalk. Marco was already at the passenger side of the car. He took one look at Alessandro's face and opened the door without a word. The face that got into the SUV was not the face that had spent the last month on a stool by a workbench. It was the other one, the one the borough knew, the one that decided things. "Home," Alessandro said, "and get me Fenner on the phone before we reach the bridge." He did not sleep that night. He sat in the library at the back of the house with one lamp on and did not touch the drink he had poured himself. The rain had moved off the coast hours ago. The room was quiet in the way only a very large house can be quiet, which was not quiet at all if you had lived in it long enough. He heard the pipes settle in the walls. He heard the second hand of the clock on the mantel. He heard himself think. He thought about the letter on the counter. He thought about the woman standing behind it, with her hands flat on the wood, saying she did not need a man in a coat to come in and write a check. He thought about the little girl on the step with the split sneaker and the blue button house. He thought about all the ways he had solved problems in his life. Most of them had involved money and the correct silence in the correct room. None of them would work here. If he bought the building, she would find out inside a week. Property in the borough moved through people who talked. She would know he had done it, and she would hate him for it, and she would be right too. If he wrote her a check large enough to matter, she would tear it in half. If he sent someone to the property management office to lean on them, she would smell it on her own doorstep. Sophia Bennett had spent her whole life reading wood by touch. She would read this the same way. He was not going to make her problem disappear. He was going to make her worth more than the problem. He called Fenner at 6 in the morning. Fenner had been the family's private counsel for 20 years. He did not ask why the call was that early. He listened, and then he asked 2 questions, and then he began to write. By the end of the day, the shape of it was on paper. Moretti Enterprises, the clean side of the house, the side that owned the antiques gallery on Madison and 3 furniture showrooms upstate, would enter into a formal supplier agreement with Bennett Restoration. Sophia Bennett would become the exclusive restoration partner for the company's antique inventory. All Moretti-held pieces requiring frame repair, joinery, or upholstery work would come through her shop. In exchange, the company would cover a portion of her workshop's overhead as a partnership expense, including a negotiated share of the lease, paid directly to the building owner as part of a subleasing arrangement Fenner drew up in one afternoon. The rent line, the one that had been strangling her, dropped to something a working shop could carry. Fenner did the math 3 times to make sure it was legal on every page. It was. Alessandro read the whole file at 10 that night and signed his initials in the margins where it needed them. Marco was in the doorway when he looked up. Alessandro slid the folder across the desk. Have Fenner walk it to Manhattan Property Holdings tomorrow. In person. Tell them who it's for. They will move on it inside 3 days. Marco lifted one eyebrow. He did not say anything. He understood. The way he had understood the coat coming off. The way he had understood the second car being left behind. This was not business. This was business-shaped, so it did not have to look like anything else. He took the folder. Understood. Boss. By Thursday, the papers were signed. By Friday morning, Sophia had a letter in her hand from her building's management company. Not a new eviction, a new lease. Her rent adjusted downward, and a co-signature line from Moretti Enterprises listed underneath her own. And, on the second page, a supplier partnership summary printed on Moretti letterhead, with her name and her business name on it in the same size as the company's, and no fine print anywhere in it that gave anyone the right to anything she had not agreed to. She read it once, she read it again. She sat down on the stool by the workbench and read it a 3rd time. Then she picked up the phone. He answered on the first ring. He had been waiting for it. You did this. I made a business decision that happened to include you. Don't. That is different from doing something for you, Sophia. She was quiet on the other end for a long time. He could hear the small sounds of the shop behind her. The bell above the door had rung once and gone still. Emma's voice, somewhere in the back, singing a song she was making up as she went. He waited. Alessandro. She had never used his first name before. He heard her hear herself do it. I don't know how to thank you for something like this without it sounding like I owe you something. You don't owe me anything. That was the whole point. She was quiet again. He did not fill it. He let the silence sit on the line between them, and she let it sit with him, and neither of them tried to push the other one out of it. For a woman who had spent her whole life closing doors before anyone could see through them, it was the first small thing she had let herself hand him. She had let him stay in the room. The dining table came next in the agreement, and the table could not be moved. It was too old, too long, and pinned to the room by 3 generations of hinges nobody had touched. If she was going to work on it, she was going to have to come to it. Sophia agreed on a Saturday. It was the only day she could bring Emma without missing school. Alessandro sent a car. The estate came up on them slowly. The stone wall along the road went on for longer than a wall had any business going on. Then the gate, then the trees, then the drive, long and clean, and the house at the end of it, all pale stone and dark windows, the kind of house that made a 6-year-old stop chewing on the end of her braid and press her nose to the glass. Mama. I know, sweetheart. Is this his house? Yes. All of it? All of it. Emma sat back in the seat and considered this the way she considered most large facts, seriously, and then done. At the gate stood a man in a dark coat, not young, not smiling. He had a shoulder holster under the coat, and hands that had done work most hands did not do. His face did not move when the car stopped. He looked at Sophia. He looked at the child in the back seat. He nodded to the driver. Emma got out before her mother could stop her. She marched up to the guard with a small pink bakery box in both hands, held it up like a lantern, and looked up at him the way she looked up at everyone, from the exact center of her own certainty. I brought cupcakes. The guard blinked. I burned the tops a little. But you can still eat them. Mama said we should bring something because it's rude to go to a house and not. She waited. The guard, whose name was Enzo, had done 10 years in a place where nobody had brought him anything ever, and had been out for 6, and had been standing at this gate for 4 of those, and had never in that time been offered a burned cupcake by a 6-year-old in mended sneakers. He took the box, slowly, as if it might come apart. Thank you, miss. You're welcome. She turned back to her mother, satisfied. See? He was nice. Sophia's throat had gone tight, and she did not know why. Inside the house, Emma found the kitchen the way children find kitchens, by smell and by instinct. Nonna Rosa was at the counter, 78 years old and elbow deep in flour, and she looked up when a small stranger came around the doorframe and did not look surprised. Old women were not surprised by children. Children were the one thing they still expected. "You must be Emma. Are you the cooking grandma?" "I am the cooking grandma. I brought cupcakes, but I gave them to the man at the gate. That was very kind of you. Come, sit. Tell me about your buttons." Emma climbed onto the tall kitchen stool and told her about the buttons. She told her about the blue one from her birthday. She told her about the pearl one from her mother's sweater from before. She asked how you made the little cookies with the almond on top, the kind with the powdered sugar. And Nonna Rosa began, patiently, to explain, and did not stop for 40 minutes. In the hallway outside, Alessandro stood with one hand on the door frame and did not move. He had lived in this house all his life. He had never heard it sound like this. In the dining room, Sophia was on her hands and knees under the table with a measuring tape, writing numbers in the small notebook, running her palm along the underside of the wood, where 3 generations of the family had reached under to pass something, to find something, to touch it out of habit at the end of a meal. She read the grain the way she had read the chairs. Slowly, with respect. She did not know he was watching her from the hall. He watched her anyway. At the end of the day, Marco walked him out to the car after Sophia and Emma had gone. "Enzo asked me a question." "Boss, ask what?" "Whether the little girl is coming back tomorrow." Alessandro did not smile. Something in his chest moved anyway, warm and small, in a place that had gone cold enough, long enough, that he had almost stopped noticing it was there. It was a Saturday evening when he came by the shop unannounced, and Sophia and Emma were still there. The bell rang past 7. The overhead lights were off. Only the bench lamp was on in the back, and the amber circle of it made the whole front of the shop feel like the inside of a lantern. Alessandro was carrying 2 paper bags with the top folded down, and a wooden logo pressed into the seam. Emma spotted the bags first. She spotted the logo second. She was off her stool before her mother could turn around. "Is that from the place with the mural on the wall?" "It is." "Did you bring the one with the bacon?" "I brought 2 of the one with the bacon." "You knew I liked carbonara?" I asked Nonna Rosa. Emma turned to her mother with the entire moral weight of the moment on her small face. "Mama," he asked Nonna Rosa. Sophia set her tools down. She was tired in a way that had gotten used to itself. She was not going to fight a hot meal on a Saturday. They cleared a corner of the workbench. Emma insisted on a tablecloth. There was no tablecloth. There was a folded square of upholstery velvet in a scrap bin, amber like the finished chair, and she spread it out over the wood with the seriousness of a child laying an altar cloth. Alessandro set out the containers. 3 forks, 3 napkins. He had thought of the napkins. They ate at the bench with the bench lamp on. Emma talked. She told them about a boy in her class named Jonah who had eaten a crayon on a dare. She told them about the substitute teacher who could not remember anyone's name and just called everyone friend. She told them she had drawn a picture of the guard at the gate and given it to Nonna Rosa to give to him, and Nonna Rosa had said she would put it on the refrigerator, which was a very good place because that was where all the important things went. Alessandro listened to her the way he had never in his life listened to a man across a table with a contract between them. He did not check the time. He did not glance at his phone. He watched the little girl talk, and he heard every word, and he made small, correct sounds in the right places, and Sophia, across from him, watched him do it, and something in her face went softer than she meant it to. After a while, Emma slowed down. She leaned her head against the arm of the half-restored wing chair she had climbed into for the meal. She stopped mid-sentence about the crayon. Her eyes went heavy. The fork slipped out of her hand and landed quietly on the velvet. Sophia caught it without looking. She got up and eased Emma sideways into the chair so her head was on the arm and her legs were tucked, and she took off her own cardigan and laid it over her. She sat back down across from him and folded her arms across her chest and looked at her sleeping daughter for a long time before she said anything. "She hasn't slept easy like that in 3 years." He didn't answer. She had not said it to be answered. The bench lamp buzzed once and went back to steady. He asked, quietly, "Her father?" Sophia's hands did not move. Her voice did. "He died when Emma was 3. It wasn't dramatic. He had a heart attack at a red light on the way home from work. The car in front of him thought he'd fallen asleep. He was 34 years old and there was nothing wrong with him, and then there was." She said it the way she had probably said it 100 times, in a voice she had built for saying it. "I'm sorry. So am I." She looked at him then, straight on, no smile. "I keep waiting for the part where this goes wrong, Alessandro, where you get bored, where you decide the little shop and the little girl were a nice season, and you go back to whatever it is you do the rest of the time." He held her look. He did not tell her he wouldn't. He did not make her a speech. He had made speeches to a woman once before, and then he had gone back to his desk and stayed there for 4 years. "I can't prove any of that to you with words," he said. "I can only keep showing up until it stops being a question you have to ask." She did not answer. She looked down at Emma, at the cardigan over the small shoulders, at the fork on the velvet. She reached out and, without thinking about it, smoothed her daughter's hair back from her forehead in the automatic way a mother does when she is not sure her hands are still hers. Alessandro watched her do it. He understood, sitting at the workbench in a shop that smelled like glue and sawdust and hot bacon from a paper bag, that he was not going to leave this table the way he had left every other table in his life. 3 weeks later, the estate was full. The annual Moretti gathering had been held on the same weekend for as long as anyone alive could remember. It went by the family calendar, not the city one, and every year the same names came up the drive in dark cars: businessmen who owned buildings along the water, 2 former judges, a congressman who did not put it on his official schedule, and, at tables placed carefully apart from the others, the heads of the 5 houses that ran the island's older kind of business, each seated with the men they trusted and the men they watched. The chandeliers were on. The Tuscan wine had been brought up from the cellar in the afternoon. In every corner of every room, a conversation was happening, and underneath every conversation, a second one, and underneath the second, a third. Alessandro had invited Sophia. She had said no twice. She had said yes on a Thursday, quietly, on the phone, and only after he told her Emma could come. She wore a plain navy dress with sleeves to the elbow. No jewelry except a small pair of studs. Her hair was down. She looked, standing in the marble entry with Emma at her hand, like a woman who had not spent any of the last week trying to look like something she was not, and had come out ahead of every woman in the room who had. Lucia Moretti saw her first. Lucia was 60. Her hair had gone the pale, expensive white of a woman who had decided a long time ago that the color of authority suited her. She wore the pearls that had belonged to her mother's mother, 3 strands, cool against the black silk of her dress. She stood near the fireplace with a glass of red held at exactly the height a woman held a glass when she wanted her hands to look at rest. She watched Sophia and Emma cross the room toward her son. She did not move to meet them. She waited. Alessandro brought them to her. "Mother, this is Sophia Bennett, and this is Emma." Lucia's smile was polite. Her eyes were not. "How resourceful of my son to bring a guest. He so rarely brings anyone special." Sophia met the smile with one of her own that was not any warmer. "Mrs. Moretti, please, enjoy the evening." The exchange lasted 11 seconds. Lucia turned back to her conversation, the message, delivered. Alessandro did not leave Sophia and Emma alone for the rest of the night. He did not do it the way a man showing off a woman does it. He did it the way a man protects one. He stood at her shoulder. He introduced her by name to the people he introduced her to at all, and he did not introduce her to the ones he did not want her measured by. He kept Emma close to his other side, one hand loosely at the little girl's back whenever she wandered. Lucia noticed everything. Around 10, the tapping of a knife against a glass called the room to order for the first of the family toasts. Conversation dropped. Servers stepped back. In the small silence between speeches, when everyone was still holding their breath waiting for the next one, Emma slipped her hand out of Alessandro's and stepped forward. She reached up and tugged the sleeve of his jacket, the same tug she had used at the market when she was a stranger. "Mr. Alessandro, can I ask you a question?" Heads at the nearest tables turned first. Then, in the way a stillness spreads across a full room, the tables beyond them turned too. Of course. She looked up at him with her whole open face, entirely without any sense of the room, the way only a 6-year-old can be entirely without any sense of a room. "Can you marry my mom?" The room laughed. Not cruelly. The way a room laughs at a child's question. Wine glasses lifted again. A woman near the piano put a hand over her mouth. Somewhere behind them, Sophia went completely still, her hand rising halfway to her own mouth and stopping. Alessandro did not laugh. He knelt. He went down on one knee in the middle of the room in front of every table that ran every neighborhood on the island, and he brought himself to Emma's height, and the laughter thinned as people realized, one by one, that he was not going to make a joke. "Emma, yes, if your mother would have me, that would be the greatest honor of my life." The silence that came down on the room after that was not the silence of a joke landing. It was the other kind, the kind that means a decision has just been made in public that everyone in the room now has to decide what to do with. Emma nodded once, satisfied, as if a small piece of business had been correctly closed. Across the room, Lucia's glass had stopped halfway to her mouth. She did not lower it. She did not lift it. She held it exactly where it had frozen. And she watched her son kneel on her floor in front of a stranger's child. And something in her face went to a place it had not been in a very long time. The house was quiet by 9 the next morning. The catering staff had come and gone. The chairs had been folded. The wine glasses had been washed in the kitchen and put back into the cabinet at the end of the hall. There was no evidence, walking through the rooms, that 100 people had stood in them the night before. The Moretti house had been built to erase itself after use. Lucia had trained it that way. She was in her reading room at the back of the house when housekeeping delivered the message. Alessandro was to come to her at 10. She sat with her back to the tall east windows. The sun came in over her shoulders and threw her face into shadow when she looked up at whoever was standing in front of her. She had used the trick on his father. She had used it on the family lawyers. She had used it on him since he was 7 years old, and she was using it now. He came in exactly at 10. He closed the door behind him. He did not sit. Do you understand what happened last night? I understand exactly what happened last night. In front of every man on this coast who watches this family for weakness. In front of every man on this coast who watches this family for who leads it. She set her cup down on the saucer without a sound. You knelt in a room, Alessandro. In our room. And you let a 6-year-old child ask you if you were marrying a woman you have known for 2 months. And you answered her out loud. I answered her honestly. Honesty in that room was the least useful thing you could have offered. He did not argue that. He stood with his hands loosely at his sides and he waited. A widow with a child, Alessandro. Yes. Renting a workshop in Carroll Gardens. Yes. A woman with no name in any room that matters to us. A woman with no protection of her own. A woman who cannot even keep a lease without your intervention. She let the word intervention sit between them a second longer than she needed to make sure he heard that she knew about the partnership. He did not react. He had been raised by this woman. He knew every angle in the room she had built. You do not need to catalog her, mother. I am reminding you what the men at those tables saw. They saw me on one knee. They will remember it. That is all I need them to do. She stood up. She rarely stood up in this room. She came around the side of the desk so the light was no longer behind her, and she stopped a few feet away from him, and her voice went quiet in the way it went quiet only when she was about to say something she had decided to say a long time before this morning. Isabella understood who we are. The name landed the way she had meant it to land. He felt it under his ribs. She was born into this world, Alessandro. She knew the doors. She knew the risks. She married you knowing what standing next to you would ask of her. She died standing next to me, mother. His voice had gone very even, because she was born into this world, because she was the correct kind of woman on the correct kind of steps, and someone with a rifle knew exactly where to find her. I am not going to repeat that with Sophia. I am not going to arrange another woman's life into the shape of a target because the shape is familiar to you. Lucia's mouth tightened. Do not use her against me. I am not using her against you. I am using her the way she would want to be used. If she still got to have an opinion, she would have hated what you are doing right now. You do not know that. I do. I was married to her for 4 years. Silence. Lucia moved back behind the desk. She sat down. She folded her hands over the blotter and she looked at her son the way she looked at contracts. There are 7 senior voices in this family, Alessandro. You know their names as well as I do. If I speak to them by the end of the week, 3 of them will listen. If I speak to them by the end of the month, 5 will. There is a vote in this family that has not been called in 22 years. Do not force me to call it. You are threatening to remove me from the seat my father left me. I am protecting that seat from a decision my son is making with his heart instead of his head. He tilted his head very slightly. Is that what you told my father? When he chose you? She did not answer. A girl from a mining town. Not a family. Not a name. Nothing in the room she walked into that said she belonged there. Was that a decision his head made, mother? Or was that a decision his heart made? And did anyone in this house sit him down in a reading room and read him a list of everything wrong with you? She had gone still. He saw it. He did not press it. He had not come in here to break her. I am not asking your permission, he said. I did not come to this room this morning to ask you anything. I came because you sent for me, and because I owe you the respect of standing in front of you when you speak to me. I am telling you what is happening. Sophia and Emma are what is happening. Whether you help me or you fight me, that does not change. He crossed to the door. At the door, he stopped with his hand on the handle, and he did not turn around. You had a husband who came home to you every night for 31 years, mother. Do not spend the last part of your life teaching your son how to lose that. He opened the door and he left. She stayed where she was. The sun moved across the desk. The cup of coffee at her elbow went cold. She did not lift it. She sat there for a long time with her hands folded, and she looked at the empty chair across from her, and she did not, for the first time in many years, know what she was going to do next. 3 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon, the bell above the shop door rang and Sophia looked up expecting a delivery. The woman in the doorway was in a long black cashmere coat that did not belong on that block. Her hair was the pale white Sophia had seen once in a chandelier-lit room. There was no driver behind her, no man at her shoulder. She had come alone, which was its own kind of statement. Lucia Moretti did not need protection where she went. Where she went, she was the pressure. "Miss Bennet, we need to talk." Sophia set down the awl in her hand. She had known this visit was coming since the moment on the marble floor when Alessandro had gone down on one knee. She had not known which day. She was almost relieved it was this one, because Emma was at school and would not have to see any of it. "Come in, Mrs. Moretti. Would you like tea? Please." Sophia went to the small back kettle. Her hands did not shake. She was proud of that. She came back with 2 cups and set them on the workbench between them. Lucia did not sit. She stood with her gloved hands still holding the cup she was not going to drink, and she looked around the shop once, slowly, taking in the tools, the offcuts, the amber velvet on the finished chair in the corner, Emma's coloring book on the small back table. She did not say anything about any of it. She did not need to. "Do you know what my son really does for a living, Miss Bennet?" Sophia's stomach dropped. She kept her face level. "He restores furniture. He owns a company that restores furniture. He has holdings in real estate. That is what my son does with half of his time. I am asking you about the other half." Sophia did not answer. "I will save us both an afternoon." Lucia set the cup down. "The Moretti name is old on this coast. Older than the antique business. Older than the real estate. There are neighborhoods on this island where the rent is paid to us and not to a landlord, and where a name is spoken before a decision is made, and where an argument between 2 men is settled at a table before it is settled in a street. My husband ran that side of the house for 31 years. My son has run it for 11. My grandson, if he ever has one, will run it after him." Sophia's hand had gone cold around her own cup. "There are men in this city who would very much like to sit where my son sits. There are men in 3 other cities who would like to see him buried before they sit down to breakfast tomorrow. There have been attempts on his life, Miss Bennet. There will be more. This is the truth about the man who has been buying you dinner and paying half your rent." Sophia set the cup down before her hand betrayed her. Lucia did not stop. "My son was married once. Her name was Isabella. She was 31 years old and she was standing on a set of marble steps beside him in the middle of the afternoon in a foreign city, and the man with the rifle was aiming for my son and he took her instead. My son does not talk about it. I do. I am talking about it now because you need to hear it from someone who has already buried the woman who stood where you are standing." The shop was very quiet. "You have a daughter, Miss Bennet, a little girl who brings cupcakes to a man at a gate. A little girl who has already been photographed by more than one camera, at more than one window since the night you walked into my house. Do you understand me? There is already a picture of Emma, somewhere in this city. On somebody's phone, there is already a picture of your 6-year-old daughter, and I am not the one who took it." Sophia's breath had gone shallow. She held on to the edge of the workbench. Lucia's voice, when it came again, was quieter. Not kind, just quieter. "Are you prepared to bury her, the way I buried Isabella? Because that is the question, Miss Bennet. Not whether my son loves you, not whether you love him. The question is whether you are prepared to bury your child for the answer." She reached into her coat and took out a plain white envelope. She set it on the workbench between them. She did not open it. She did not need to. Both of them knew what it was. "There is enough there for a new shop. Anywhere you like. Anywhere but this state. Enough for a school for your daughter. Enough for a life that does not have a rifle in it." She stepped back from the workbench. "If you love my son, Miss Bennet, you will leave him. It is the only way you protect him. He will not do it for himself. He has already proven that." Sophia did not touch the envelope. She did not push it back. Her hand stayed flat on the wood. Lucia looked at her for one long moment more. Then she nodded once, very slightly, the way a woman nods to another woman who has understood the terms without needing to say so. She left. The bell rang once above the door. It rang again as the door swung shut. Sophia stood at the workbench for a long time without moving. The envelope sat where Lucia had left it. She did not look at it. She looked, instead, at the small framed photograph pinned above her bench, the one of Emma at 4 years old on the front step of the shop, holding her mason jar up to the light with both hands, grinning at whoever was behind the camera, as if the world were only made of good things and she had just been handed one. Sophia lowered her forehead to the workbench. She did not cry. She was too far past crying for that. She did not sleep for 3 nights. She lay in the small bedroom above the shop with Emma breathing evenly across the room, and she stared at the ceiling and turned it all over the way she turned a piece of wood before deciding where to cut. Isabella on the marble steps, Emma at the front gate with a bakery box, Alessandro on one knee in his mother's house in front of every man who had ever wanted his chair. She did not believe Lucia because of the money. She believed Lucia because she already knew, without anyone having to tell her, that Alessandro would step between her and any bullet in any room, and would not think about it first, and would not think about it afterward. She had seen it in the way he had crossed his mother's floor at the party to stand beside her, in the way he had positioned himself between Emma and every stranger the whole night. He did not know he was doing it. That was how she knew he would not stop. She did not want him to have to choose. Not between her and his family. Not between her and the seat his father had left him. Not between her and the world he had been born into. The world that had already taken one wife from him and would, if she stayed, decide it was owed a second. She did not tear the check. She sealed it back into its own envelope, unopened, and put a plain sheet of paper around it in a larger envelope, and addressed it to the estate. She would drop it in a mailbox at the bus terminal. She packed the shop after Emma went to bed on the 3rd night. She did it in the dark. She took only what mattered. 2 suitcases, her tool roll, the small framed photograph of Emma from the wall above the bench, the little notebook, nothing else. She left the finished chairs where they stood. She left the amber velvet on the workbench where it had been on the night of the carbonara. She went into Emma's room around 3, and sat on the edge of the bed and touched the little girl's shoulder and said her name. Emma sat up. She was already crying before she was fully awake, the way children cry when their bodies know something before their minds do. "Mama, I know, baby. I know. Where are we going? We're going to visit somebody. For a little while. Are we coming back?" Sophia did not answer. Emma's face broke. "Why are we leaving? Mr. Alessandro will look for us. He'll find us, Mama. He always comes back. He'll be all right, sweetheart. He will. We're going to be all right, too. Mama, no." Sophia gathered her up and held her against her chest and rocked her the way she had rocked her when she was 2, and Emma cried into her collarbone the way she had not cried in 3 years, and Sophia held her and did not say anything else because there was nothing left she could say that would not be a lie. Downstairs, at the workbench, she left a folded sheet of paper with his name on the outside. "Alessandro, thank you for staying. Now it is my turn to stay for you, by leaving. Please do not look for us. Please, if you love us, let this be the one thing I get to give you. S." She left the mason jar on the shelf above the bench. She could not carry that with her. Not tonight. Some memories did not travel. She would tell Emma, later, that they had left it so it would be there when she came home, even if she was not sure that was true. The bus terminal was cold. The bus pulled out at 4 minutes past 4 in the morning. Emma slept with her head against the window, and her cheeks still wet. Sophia watched the city slide backward behind the glass, and did not let herself close her eyes. He came to the shop at 9. He had a coffee for her from the place on the corner, in the paper cup with the paper sleeve she liked. He had a smaller one for Emma with warm milk in it and no coffee. He had been carrying them in both hands when he came around the corner and saw the lock on the door and the darkness behind the glass. He stood on the sidewalk for a long time. He did not set the cups down. Marco had come around the corner behind him at some distance. He saw his boss standing at the door, and he understood before he was close enough to see the lock. Alessandro shifted the smaller cup into the same hand as the larger one, and took the key Sophia had given him 3 weeks ago out of his inside pocket and turned it in the lock. The shop was, as she had left it, the finished chair, the amber velvet folded on the bench, the mason jar on the high shelf, on the workbench, weighted under a piece of scrap wood, a folded sheet of paper with his name on it. He read it standing up. He did not sit down. He did not break anything. He set the coffees on the workbench, both of them, side by side, the way they had sat at dinner. He stood there a long time. Behind him, Marco cleared his throat from the doorway. "Boss." Alessandro did not turn around. "Find her," he said, "but do not scare her." Salvatore Rizzo had been waiting 6 years. He ran a piece of Queens that touched the water in 2 places. His father had run it before him, and his father's father before him, and every one of them had believed, in his own bones, that the Moretti seat should have gone to their table 2 generations ago and had not. Salvatore had lost a cousin in a warehouse in Red Hook 9 years back, In a night his men had started and had not survived. He had lost an uncle to a bullet that had come out of a car nobody had ever traced, and he had known who had traced it. Even so, he had spent 6 years waiting for the door to open. He had spent the last several months paying men to sit in cars and watch the man who kept that door closed. His men had photographs of Sophia. They had photographs of Emma. They had a picture of the little girl handing a bakery box to a guard at a gate on the North Shore, taken from a boat 200 yards off the beach, and Salvatore had looked at that picture a long time when it was brought to him. He had not moved on it. It had not been the right moment yet. He had been patient in the way patient men in his line of work are patient, which is to say the way a spider is patient. The moment his men called in that Sophia Bennett had loaded 2 suitcases into a taxi in the middle of the night and gone to the bus terminal alone with her daughter, he stopped being patient. He put 2 cars on the road inside 40 minutes. Sophia and Emma got off the bus in a small town in eastern Pennsylvania at the beginning of the second morning. The town had a diner, a gas station, and a 2-story motel with a hand-painted sign that flickered on and off. Sophia paid cash for a room at the far end of the second floor. She gave the clerk a name that was not her own. Emma had been quiet since the bus terminal. She was not sleeping. She was not talking either. She was carrying her small backpack and holding her mother's hand and doing what her mother told her. They went to bed at 9. At 4 in the morning, the door came off its frame. Sophia was up before her feet were on the floor. "Emma, bathroom, go, now." She shoved her daughter toward the small bathroom door and put her own body between the child and the men coming through the outer one. There were 3 of them. They were not talking. They had the look of men who had done this before and did not need to. Emma made it as far as the bathroom door. A hand caught her by the shoulder of her jacket and yanked her back into the room. She did not scream. She had gone past screaming. Her face had gone the frozen blank of a child who has already understood something no 6-year-old is supposed to understand. Sophia went for the man holding her daughter. She hit him. She hit him again. She got in one good strike with the base of a lamp before the second man came around behind her, and something hard came down against her temple, and the room turned white and then black, and she went down against the corner of the bed and did not come back up. The men were out of the motel in 90 seconds. The manager, when he came to investigate the noise at 5, would say he had not heard anything. He had not been paid to hear anything. By the time the sun came up over the ridge, Sophia and Emma were in the back of 2 separate cars, moving north. Alessandro's phone rang at 11 minutes to 7. He answered on the first ring. He had not gone to bed. "Moretti, you know who this is?" He did. He recognized the voice before the sentence was finished. He said nothing. "I have something of yours." 2 somethings. Alessandro closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. He opened them again. "Terms. Brooklyn. Manhattan. Every corner your family calls yours south of the bridge and east of the water. Signed over by the end of the day. In writing. Witnessed. Or I go in the reverse order of preference. Do you know what the reverse order of preference is, Alessandro? It is the child first." Alessandro's hand tightened on the phone until the plastic complained. "You will not touch her. I will do exactly what I say. You have a habit of underestimating me. Do not. Where? You will get an address in 3 hours. If I do not see your lawyer at a table by nightfall, I start." The line went dead. Alessandro stood in the middle of his study with the phone in his hand. He did not move for the length of 10 slow breaths. Then he set the phone down on the desk, very carefully, as if it might break. Marco. Marco was already in the doorway. He had been there since the phone rang. 20 men, the ones who followed my father, not the new ones, the old ones, the ones who owe this house. "Yes, boss," he said. 3 hours. "That is because he wants me on a table signing. He will not wait 3 hours. He will move before then. Find her before he calls me back." "Yes, boss." Marco was gone. Alessandro went to the wall safe behind the row of books at the back of the study. He opened it. Inside, on a folded piece of oilcloth, sat a handgun that had belonged to his father and to his father's father before him. He had not taken it out in 3 years. He had not needed to. He took it out now. He checked the chamber. He checked the clip. He slid the clip back home with the soft click of a piece of metal that had been made to make exactly that sound. He did not tremble. He put the gun in the inside pocket of his coat. In the car, on the drive south, he did not speak to Marco. He did not speak to the man at the wheel. He watched the road come at him through the windshield, and he did not blink for very long stretches. Marco had known him for 31 years. He had seen him angry. He had seen him grieving. He had seen him standing in the rain the morning after Isabella died, watching men lower a coffin into the ground. He had never, in 31 years, seen the face his boss was wearing right now. He drove faster. They had Sophia and Emma in a warehouse on the west side of Newark, 4 blocks off the river, in a building that had gone empty when its owner had gone into a federal courtroom 5 years ago and had not come out. The building did not have a name on the deed anymore. That was why Rizzo had chosen it. He did not know that a Moretti had put a man inside every leasing office in the tri-state area for 2 generations, and that a building without a name on its deed was the exact kind of building the network Alessandro had inherited, knew about the fastest. They had the address before the sun was down. The plan was simple. It had to be simple. Marco would take 12 men in from the front. He would go loud. He would go loud enough that every man Rizzo had brought would turn toward the noise. Alessandro would take 4 with him and come in from the loading bay at the back, where a rusted service door opened onto a lot the local drivers had used 40 years ago, and everyone had since forgotten. They would move to the center of the building along the far wall. They would take the room where Sophia and Emma were being held from the side. Rizzo would not be watching. They went in at 7 minutes past sunset. The world exploded at the front of the building. Marco's men were shouting. Something metal went over. A window shattered. Rizzo's men, most of them young, most of them hungry to prove something to a boss who did not deserve them, turned toward the front the way any young man turns toward the loudest thing in a room, and never saw the 4 figures moving low along the west wall. The first 2 of Rizzo's men were down before they realized there was a west wall. The warehouse lights hung on long chains from a ceiling 3 stories up. The bulbs were old. The bulbs had not been changed in a very long time. When the shooting started properly, one of them took a stray round and burst, and glass came down like rain across the concrete floor, and the room went into the flickering half-dark of a place lit by muzzle flash and the 2 bulbs that were still holding on. Alessandro moved through it without slowing. Sophia was in the far corner of a room off the main floor, tied to a folding chair, her mouth taped, a cut at her temple where the base of the lamp had done its work in reverse when she came around. Emma was on the floor beside her chair with her small body pressed against her mother's leg, arms wrapped tight around Sophia's calf. She was not crying. She had not been crying for hours. That was the part that made Sophia's chest hurt more than the ropes did. A 6-year-old should not be able to go that quiet. The door to the room came off its hinges under Alessandro's shoulder. The 2 guards inside were on the floor before they had lifted their guns off their belts. The last man in the room, at the far side, was Rizzo. Rizzo had heard the door go. He had already been moving. He reached down and grabbed Emma by the shoulder of her jacket and pulled her up in front of him with the barrel of a pistol against the side of her head. It was the oldest move in a very old book, and Rizzo had done it before, and had always had it work. Not one step, Alessandro. Alessandro did not stop. He raised the pistol that had belonged to his father, and he fired once. The bullet went through the back of Rizzo's hand, the one holding the gun, and Rizzo screamed and let go of both the gun and the child at the same time. And the pistol clattered on the concrete, and Emma went to the floor. Alessandro crossed the room in 3 strides and picked her up. She did not scream. She did not cry. She only wrapped both arms around his neck and buried her face against his collar and, in a voice so small he almost did not hear it, said one word, "Mama, I've got you." He carried her the 4 steps to Sophia and knelt beside the chair. He set Emma down against her mother's side long enough to work the knife from his boot and cut the ropes at Sophia's wrists and her ankles. He pulled the tape from her mouth as gently as tape can be pulled from a face that has been struck. "Are you all right?" She was crying without knowing she was crying. She nodded. "Take her out first. I take you both. Alessandro. Both of you." He got one arm around Sophia and lifted her up, and she was lighter than she should have been, and Emma clung to her other side, and the 3 of them moved for the back of the warehouse together. Behind them, in the main space, the noise was ending. Marco's men had swept the room. 2 of Rizzo's had run and been caught in the lot. Most of the rest had put down what they were holding when they realized whose men they were being asked to point a gun at. Rizzo himself was on his knees at the center of the warehouse floor, holding a hand that was no longer usable, and Marco stood over him with the calm of a man who had already decided which car was going to take the prisoner where. Alessandro did not look back at any of it. He kept moving toward the back door. He did not know, because he could not know, that up on the second-floor catwalk that ran around 3 sides of the main floor, one of Rizzo's men was still alive. The man had climbed up there 10 minutes before the raid to smoke a cigarette. He had not come down when the shooting started. He was young. He was frightened. He was also armed. He was crouched now behind the low iron railing at the corner nearest the back door, and he was watching a man in a dark coat move toward that door with his arm around a woman, and he had steadied his pistol against the top rail, and he was sighting down the barrel at a broad back that had just turned away from him. His finger settled against the trigger. It was the glass that saved him. A sheet of the shattered warehouse window lay across the floor between the back door and the catwalk. The last of the working bulbs caught the pale glint of the pistol barrel on that broken surface for less than the length of a heartbeat. Sophia saw it. She did not have time to shout. She did not have time to think the word gun. Her body understood before her mind did. She twisted her shoulder hard against Alessandro's chest and drove him sideways with everything she had left in her. The shot came at the same instant. Alessandro stumbled to his left, one hand still around Emma, and the bullet that had been aimed at the center of his back went through the right side of Sophia's ribs instead. She made a sound that was not quite a cry. Her legs gave out under her. Alessandro turned. He had the pistol up before he had finished the turn. He fired twice. The first round took the man on the catwalk in the shoulder. The second put him down. The whole thing took perhaps 2 seconds, and Alessandro would not remember any of it clearly afterward, because by the second shot his knees were already dropping, and both his hands were already reaching for the woman folding down against his side. He caught her before she hit the concrete. Sophia. Her eyes had gone glassy at the edges. Her hand had come up to the wound at her ribs, more to cover it than to press it. Emma broke. "Mama." The word came out of her the way a word comes out of a person for the first time in a long time. It was the first time she had cried since the door of the motel had come off its frame. It was the first time she had made any real sound at all. "Mama, no." Alessandro got one arm under Sophia's knees and the other under her shoulders and lifted her, and he was already moving. Marco met him at the door. Marco saw the blood on the front of Alessandro's coat, and he did not say a word. He ran to the car ahead of them and had the back door open by the time Alessandro reached the curb. They laid her across the back seat. Alessandro slid in first and pulled her head onto his lap. Emma climbed in after and pressed against her mother's other side with her small hand flat on Sophia's shoulder, as if she could hold her there just by touching. Marco was in the driver's seat and the car was already moving. How far? 20 minutes at speed. 10. The car went. In the back, Alessandro pressed his hand against the wound in Sophia's side and felt the warm dart come up through his fingers. His white shirt was already gone. He did not notice. Sophia's eyes tracked toward Emma. Her mouth moved without much sound behind it. "Don't let her see me like this, Emma. Sweetheart, close your eyes. Put your face here." He guided the little girl's forehead against his shoulder. She did what he said. She was shaking. Sophia's fingers found his sleeve. She held on. "You do not get to leave again," he said. He did not recognize his own voice. "Not ever. Do you hear me? Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not to protect me. Not for any reason a woman ever thought of." She smiled. It was the smallest smile he had ever seen on a face. "I am not going anywhere." The car took a corner hard. By the time they came through the ambulance bay of the small private hospital the family had used for 4 generations, Sophia was pale, and her breathing had gone very shallow. 2 nurses and a surgeon met the car before Marco had finished putting it in park. They lifted her out onto a gurney and had her down the corridor toward the operating room before Alessandro had crossed the sliding doors behind them. They did not let him past a certain point. He stood in the corridor outside the operating room with his hands still red. A nurse came to him with a basin and a cloth and asked if she could wash his hands. He shook his head once. He sat down in the plastic chair against the wall. He did not lean back. He did not close his eyes. Nonna Rosa arrived within the hour. She had been called from the estate. She took Emma into her lap in the chair beside him and wrapped her old arms around the little girl and rocked her, slowly, and murmured, over and over, sounds that were not quite words, the way a very old woman soothes any child in any language. Emma cried herself into a small, exhausted sleep against her chest. The operation lasted 5 hours. The bullet had passed through cleanly. It had missed her liver by less than an inch. It had missed the artery underneath the ribs by less than that. The angle at which she had turned to shove Alessandro out of the way had rotated her body just enough to save her own life, while she saved his. The surgeon came out at 3:30 in the morning, still in his gown. "She will live, Mr. Moretti." Alessandro stood up. He did not speak. He lowered his head. It was the first time in 3 years he had bowed his head to anything or anyone. He stood in the corridor with his hands still dark at the cuffs, and the tears he had held back for 3 years came very quietly. And Nonna Rosa reached out from the next chair without a word and put her old hand over his, and they stayed like that for a long time. Lucia found out at 4 in the morning. The call came from the head of the hospital's board, not from her son, and not from Marco. She had been sitting up in the library with a book she had not been reading. She had known something was wrong for 2 days, in the way a woman who had watched a house all her life knew when the house had gone quiet in the wrong way. The car took her into the city faster than the driver would have preferred. She came through the sliding doors of the private wing at 10 minutes to 5, still in the black wool coat she had put on over her night clothes. No jewelry except the pearls she had not remembered to take off before bed. A nurse recognized her and rose. Lucia lifted one gloved hand, one small shake of her head. She did not need to be walked anywhere. She had used this hospital for 40 years. She found the room by the guard outside it. She knew the guard. He inclined his head to her once and did not speak. The door was open. She stopped in the doorway. Sophia was in the bed, propped slightly, an IV in the back of one hand, and a bandage across the right side of her ribs, where the gown had been drawn away. Her face was turned toward the window. Her breathing was steady but shallow. The bruise at her temple had come up dark. Beside the bed sat Alessandro. He had not changed his shirt. The cuffs were still dark. He was leaning forward, elbows on his knees, and one of his hands was closed around Sophia's, thumb over her knuckles, holding it the way a man holds a thing he has almost lost twice. At the foot of the bed, curled up in the plastic recliner, Nonna Rosa had put a folded blanket across. Emma was asleep. Her head was tucked against her own shoulder. One small hand hung down over the edge of the chair. Her mended sneaker had come untied. Lucia did not go in yet. She stood in the doorway, and she looked at her son. She had watched him bury Isabella. She had watched him come home from the cemetery that day, and go into the study at the back of the house and close the door. And she had watched him not open it again, in any way that mattered, for 3 years. He had been polite in that time. He had been effective. He had run every meeting he was supposed to run and had signed every paper he was supposed to sign, and none of it had reached his eyes. The man sitting in the chair beside this bed had eyes again. She saw it, and it stopped her breath. She stepped in quietly. Alessandro did not turn. "I do not want to talk to you right now, Mother." His voice was low, not angry, emptied out, like a room at the end of a long night. "I did not come here to talk." He did not answer. "I came to listen." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded once, small, without looking away from Sophia's face. Lucia crossed to the chair on the other side of the bed and sat down. She put her handbag on the floor. She folded her gloved hands in her lap. She did not reach for anything. She only looked at Sophia, at the steady rise and fall of the sheet over her chest, at the bruise at her temple, at the bandage. The room stayed like that for a long time. At some point the sky in the window turned pale gray. At the foot of the bed, Emma stirred. She opened her eyes slowly, the way children do when they wake up in a place that is not where they went to sleep. She looked at her mother first. She looked at Alessandro second. She looked at the woman in the black coat third. She was not afraid. Emma had not, in her whole small life, learned how to be afraid of the people her mother trusted, and she had already decided, in the way 6-year-olds decide these things, that anyone sitting in a chair by her mother's bed was someone her mother trusted. "Are you Mr. Alessandro's mama?" Lucia turned her head. "I am." Emma sat up in the recliner, blanket sliding down. She rubbed the sleep out of one eye with the back of her wrist. "My mama got in front of him," she said. "The bad man was going to shoot Mr. Alessandro and my mama pushed him. She has a hole in her side now, but the doctor said she is going to be all right." Lucia's mouth pressed together. "I think my mama is very brave." Lucia did not speak for a long time. When she did, her voice had gone lower. "Yes, sweetheart, your mother is very brave." Emma nodded, satisfied that the correct thing had been said, and lay back down against her small pillow with her hand curled up under her chin. The sky in the window kept going pale. Sophia stirred sometime after 7. Her eyes opened slowly. She looked first at Alessandro's face and blinked, as if to check it was still there. She looked at Emma at the foot of the bed and let a breath go she had been holding for 2 days. She looked at the woman in the chair on the far side and her breath caught. Lucia rose. She took the small paper cup of water from the tray by the bed. She held it to Sophia's lips herself, one hand steady behind the cup, one hand under Sophia's jaw. She let her drink. She set the cup down. She sat back down. "I was wrong, Sophia." Sophia did not answer. "I am sorry." Sophia looked at her a long moment. Then, slowly, painfully, she lifted the hand that was not held in Alessandro's and reached across the sheet and laid it, weakly, over Lucia's gloved one. She did not squeeze. She only left it there. For a woman who had lived her whole life closing doors before anyone could push them, it was the answer. 4 months passed. Sophia healed the way she did most things, patiently, in small, correct steps, without any sudden gestures. The bandage came off. The bruise at her temple faded. The line of the scar on her right side went from red to pink to something she would carry, and stopped hurting to touch, and eventually stopped being the first thing she noticed when she caught her own reflection in a window. She went back to work before the doctor had told her she could, because her hands had missed the wood and because a person like her did not know how to be a person like her without something to fix. Bennett Restoration reopened on the same block in Carroll Gardens. The same sign, the same bell above the door, the same amber velvet folded on the workbench where she had left it on the night she had put a folded note under a piece of scrap. Salvatore Rizzo did not sit in a room like his own again. The other houses on the coast handled it the way those things were handled between them, quietly, without paperwork, and Alessandro's neighborhoods did not lose a single street corner over the whole of it. Marco said, once, at the end of one of those weeks, that the seat Alessandro sat in had never been more secure than it was now. Alessandro did not answer him. He was not thinking about the seat. Emma went back to school. She told her class, on the first day, that a bad man had tried to take her and her mother, and that a very kind man had come to get them, and that this very kind man was probably the closest thing to a real-life superhero the world had ever had. Her teacher wrote a careful note home. Sophia read it, and folded it in half, and put it in the drawer where she kept the important papers. It was a Saturday afternoon when Alessandro came to the shop with a small wooden box under his arm. He had made it himself. He had spent 4 evenings on it in the workshop at the back of the estate, at the bench Nonno Vittorio had used, with the tools Nonno Vittorio had left behind. He had cut the dovetails by hand. He had sanded them until the joints were smooth enough that you could not feel where one piece became the other. He had oiled the wood twice. He had lined the inside with a piece of the same amber velvet Sophia had used on the first of his chairs. Emma spotted it first. What's in the box? Something for your mother first. Then me. Then you. Sophia came out from the back, drying her hands on a towel. She saw the box. She saw his face. She stopped moving. He set the box on the workbench between them and opened the lid. Inside, resting on the velvet, was Emma's mason jar. Every button in the same order she had sorted them. The blue one from the birthday shirt on top, the pearl one from her mother's sweater from before beside it. He had taken the jar off the high shelf on the day he had come to the shop and found her note, and he had carried it home himself, and had not opened it, and had waited. Beside the jar sat one new button, a plain, dark one, slightly worn, the button from the coat he had been wearing on the morning at the market, when he had knelt on cobblestones for a stranger's child. Emma made a small sound and covered her mouth with both hands. Under the velvet lining, tucked into a small fold he had cut himself, was a ring. Not showy. Not the kind of ring a man with his money could have bought if he had wanted to make a statement instead of a promise. A single, small stone, a plain platinum band. He knelt. He went down on one knee in the middle of the shop on a Saturday afternoon, in front of the workbench where she had rebuilt his family's chairs, and there was no room full of men watching this time. There was only a woman and a little girl and a jar of buttons on velvet. This button changed my life, he said. He was looking only at Sophia. And you changed my heart. Sophia's eyes had already filled. I spent 3 years teaching myself not to feel anything, because feeling meant losing. You taught me it can also mean being given something. I do not know how to say it any plainer than that. I would like the rest of my life to be with you. With both of you. Emma had gone very still. Sophia, will you marry me? Sophia did not answer with words for a long moment. She could not. She only put one hand over her mouth and one hand out toward him, and the smile that came onto her face was one he had never seen before. It was the first smile of hers he had ever seen that did not have a single wall left behind it. Yes! Emma shrieked. She hurled herself off her stool and threw her small arms around both of them at once, one around her mother's waist and one around Alessandro's neck, and Sophia laughed and cried at the same time, and Alessandro held them both, and did not, for a long moment, move. Outside, on the sidewalk, Marco stood at the passenger side of the car with his back to the shop, watching the street, doing what he had done for 31 years. Through the reflection in the shop window across the way, he could see the 3 of them clearly. His boss on one knee, the woman's hand on his face, the little girl wrapped around them both. For the first time in as many years as Marco could remember, he smiled. They did not need him to look. He looked anyway, because a man like him had watched over a man like Alessandro for a long time in a great deal of dark, and he had a right, this once, to stand outside a lit window and know that the man he had followed had come home. Real change, as Sophia would have said, did not arrive in a single afternoon. It arrived the way she rebuilt a chair, one careful stitch, one honest conversation, one ordinary Saturday at a time, until what had once been broken could hold weight again. The man who had once made an entire underworld lower its voice when he entered a room had, in the end, found the one thing that his name and his money had never been able to buy him, a real home. And that, in the end, is the quiet truth this story leaves behind. Love is not the loud thing. Love is not the speech in the ballroom or the ring in the box or even the moment on the marble floor. Love is the small, unglamorous decision to stay in the room, again and again, on the ordinary days when nothing is asking you to. It is the man who kneels for a jar of buttons when no one is watching. It is the woman who takes a bullet without stopping to weigh it. It is the mother who sits down in a chair on the other side of a hospital bed and says, "At last, I was wrong." It is the child who, without knowing she is doing it, teaches the adults around her how to open a door they thought had been closed for good. You do not need a fortune to give someone that. You only need to keep showing up. Now we would love to hear from you. Which moment reached you the most? Was it the first button on the cobblestones at the market? Was it the little girl at the ballroom asking the question that made every glass in the room go still? Was it the mother stepping in front of the bullet? Or was it the quiet one at the end? On a Saturday afternoon in a small shop, with a box of buttons and a ring? Tell us in the comments below. Tell us where you were watching from, and who came to mind while you listened. There is someone in your life right now who has been quietly staying in the room for you, and there is someone in your life right now who needs you to stay in theirs. This story is for both of them. If this story touched your heart, please tap the like button, share it with someone who needs a reminder of hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you do not miss the next one. We release new stories every day, and every subscriber, every like, every comment tells our team that these stories are finding the people they were made for. Thank you for spending this time with us. We wish you good health, a peaceful heart, and quiet days full of the ordinary kindnesses that end up mattering the most. May the people who love you keep choosing to stay, and may you keep choosing to stay for them. Take care of each other. We will see you in the next video.